Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski. Today on the podcast, we're back in Western Pennsylvania with another IUP runner known by his nickname in the running days as Birdman. Today, welcome on the podcast, Mike Higgins. Hi, Mike.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.
Let's introduce you with your self-reflection on competition. When did you first get into any kind of competitive activity?
Growing up back then, you would go to people's houses, you'd play football after school, you'd play baseball. And I really loved all sports. Unfortunately, I was pretty bad in all of them, but I continued to compete. I played Little League baseball, I played basketball and things like that. But really, it was in junior high school when I went out for our track team. That was my first introduction to running. I had not been very successful in most other sports, but I did okay in junior high. 7th, 8th, and 9th was junior high, and high school was 10th, 11th, or 12th. So I ran junior high track in 8th and 9th grade. The longest distance we had was 880 yards, half a mile. And I had minimal success. I did fine. It was not a big program, not a big schedule, but that was really the start of me running.
How was the team camaraderie? How was competition to you? And what was the facilities like? What was the name of the school?
I grew up in the Central Dauphin School District in the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania area, Linglestown or Lower Paxton Junior High School. And we didn't have really much facilities. We didn't really have a big schedule. It was just an activity that was in the spring.
Cinder track, like most of us at that time?
Cinder track, grass grown up in the track. It was not very well maintained or anything like that. It was more like an activity.
And how was the coaching? Did you have a coach that knew track?
To be honest, not, because I don't even remember who the coach was. There was a couple guys, friends that were on the team. And that was just my first taste of running.
When did you get an identity as a runner? When did it take over that you thought, I am a runner? And how were you paying attention to the larger world of track and field at that point?
I leave junior high school. I'm at Central Dauphin High School. I'm a 10th grader. My friends who had run track, some of my close friends had gone out for cross country that fall and were having some success. We were not a good team, but I wasn't running. I didn't go out. My homeroom teacher was a guy named Bob Schaefer, who happened to be the cross country coach. And about halfway through the season, seeing that some of my friends were doing okay on not a very good team, I went up to him, and this was like 3 weeks into school. The season had already started. I just said, "Hey, Coach Schaefer, do you mind if I come out for cross country?" And he said, "Sure, no problem." Literally that night, I ran from my house into a small town and back about 4 miles. I hadn't run really before or since previous spring track. And that was my first practice on my own. The next day we had a meet. It was Trinity High School on the west shore of Harrisburg. And of course, this was my first race, first day on the team. I got put on the JV team. And halfway through the race, I was leading, made 3 wrong turns, and won the race by about 40 seconds. So that was the last day I was on the JV team.
So did that guy know running?
Bob Schaefer was a great guy and a great coach. He was a soccer player at Penn State. I think he was one of those guys that got accepted the job of cross country. He was a great motivator, and we worked hard. And I consider it a great experience. I wouldn't say he was a professional runner or anything like that, but he was a great coach and a great individual.
Nice.
And just a bit of trivia, as of a couple of years ago, he was the oldest Zamboni driver in the United States for the Hershey Bears. So that was a good experience. I finished the year like 3rd or 4th on the team, not really a terrible team. But that was the start of my motivation and thinking to myself, you know what, I haven't been that successful in other athletic endeavors, but if I just run more than everyone else, I think I can be successful.
Did you take notice of the larger world of sports outside your high school at the state or district level? Was that something that was on your radar to know about?
Not really at the time, although, so think about this would have been 1972. This was when Prefontaine was making headlines. This is when Frank Shorter was starting to make headlines. This is right around the time when Steve Prefontaine was killed. I know I had a poster of Steve Prefontaine up in my bedroom wall. So, University of Oregon, tremendous cross country program. Those were the things I was starting to look at. Yes, I was getting more involved. And so that my sophomore year, that was a good experience in cross country. And so now I'm going into the spring of my sophomore year for track. And this was a bad decision. I ended up taking a job and did not go out for track. So, of course, my coach, who was also the track coach, was not very happy with me. But I made a decision that spring going into the fall for cross country. This would have been my 11th grade, that I was going to be the number one runner and we were going to have a good team. So I trained for me that summer more than I ever ran before in my life. So I took it pretty serious.
Were you training by yourself?
Yes.
And was that on the roads?
Yes.
Okay, so here we are, early 1970s. What was the running environment like in the community when you're out there running on the roads? This tall, skinny kid out running on the roads. Happened when you ran past cars, people's houses. Did you see any other runners?
This was an interesting period of time in Harrisburg because I was one of the inaugural runners, and it was either 73 or 74 when the Harrisburg Area Roadrunners Club started. I went to the first race. It was a 2-mile run. I got first place, first race. It was a great time from a running community time. And the Harrisburg Area Roadrunners Club is still going 40 some years later and doing well. So there were, certainly there was other runners that I could be around. There was events that were starting. So it was actually a very good time for running. And I really never had that much trouble on the roads. I did a lot of running on the roads. I did running on golf courses, things like that. But my goal was going into the 11th grade was I was going to be number one and we were going to have a good team.
How'd that work out?
We started summer practices in August. I'm number one. My friend from high school who really had talked me into coming out the year before, he was doing well. He ended up running collegiately as well. We were 1 and 2. The first day of school, the star basketball player decided he was going to come out and run cross country. Tremendous athlete. So in one day, I went from number one to number two, just because of his natural ability.
What were those guys' names?
Glenn Hare was the guy who I ran junior high with in high school. In my junior year, the basketball player, his name was Tim Thompson. He came out for the first time ever running cross country. Great guy, but he became number one. I think by the end of the year, I was beating him every other time. But that just further cemented to me that I was never going to let that happen again.
And how did the team do?
Coming from the year before, we were like the worst in our conference. We were above 500, did okay. We were probably maybe 4 losses in our dual meets. At that point, nobody was really doing anything at the district or the state level for the high school.
What did it end up in your senior year? What were your best or
So from 11th grade, track comes around, and I wasn't going to miss that again. I had a pretty good track season. I won most of the mile races, the 2-mile races. I was running relays and some other things. It was a very good 11th year in track. But again, I was looking for the fall because I didn't want my senior year what to happen in my junior year. I expected to be number one and I expected to have a better team. So I ramped up my training again that summer after a good track season and had a fairly successful senior year in high school. The only person that beat me in dual meets that year was Rich Delaney from Chambersburg High School. He ended up third in the state, and Chambersburg was in the top couple teams in the state. And we ended up, I think, third place in our league that year, next to Chambersburg and Carlisle. Carlisle had another great team. But Chambersburg was a team to beat.
That's as a part of a good running state. How big were the biggest meets? How many participants when you went to the conference or districts or big meets?
So probably 150, 200. I was in the central Pennsylvania. So that was a pretty big hotbed for running. We had some pretty good competition in cross country.
This is your final high school cross country
Yes.
year. How were you satisfied with your personal results at the end of that season?
I had only lost once all year in dual meets, went into the district meet very confident. I needed to be in the top 10 to go to states and completely fell apart, ended up 18th. Did not go to states in cross country, which again, all these little things that keep hitting me only serve to motivate me going forward.
At that point, before you go into your final track season, you're certainly a runner in your identity and your activities. What was your outlook for going to college and continuing?
Graduated high school in 75. There was no internet. So when you start looking at colleges, I was getting interest from some of the local colleges, Millersville, Gettysburg. And I remember my coach, Bob Schaefer, had gotten a flyer, a brochure that was sent out from Indiana University of Pennsylvania. It was from Coach Sutton at IUP. So I decided to take a trip out there. Indiana was about 3.5 hours away from Harrisburg. So my coach and my dad and I, we drove out in February in a snowstorm and met with Coach Sutton. At that point, I was looking at IUP in Gettysburg. I was looking at an Air Force ROTC scholarship at Gettysburg, but I made the decision to come to IUP. So in a way, I recruited myself.
Yeah, let's go ahead and cover your final year in track in high school.
My final year, I was having a nice year. We're running, again, a lot of cinders tracks, although the invitationals usually were on better tracks. We were running York High School, and I was in the 2-mile relay. I ran the first leg, and after the first lap, and that's when you used to wear like 1/2-inch spikes on cinders.
Right.
I got spiked right on the inside of my foot and went to the ground. I was running against one of the best 800 guys in our conference, but I got up. I caught him by the end of the half mile and we won the relay, but we lost the meet by 4 points. I ended up having to go right away to the doctors because I had almost hit my Achilles tendon. It was ripped. I had blood all over. My sock was completely red. They stitched me up and said I was done for about 4 weeks, but I never told the coaches that.
This is like a movie. You fall down and come back.
I did. I did run for about a week. We go to Chambersburg, where again, my main competitor was a guy named Rich Delaney and another guy named Brett Wagner, who were really good runners for Chambersburg. Brett was running the mile, and Rich Delaney, who had been third in the state in cross country, was running the 2-mile. And I hadn't run a race since I got knocked down. I didn't have the nurse's approval to even be running. And my dad used to take off work early and go to they were extremely supportive parents. I ran the 2-mile first, and I broke a school record and beat Rich Delaney in that race. And then I ran the mile against Brett Wagner, set a school record in that race that had stood since 1957. I think my time was 4:24. I could barely run again that spring. I ended up going to districts, but really didn't expect to do much and didn't. And that was it. So I had both the 2-mile and the 1-mile record when I left.
Cool. So you had a full week's rest with no running before those record races.
I think that's what did it. I was well rested. I had steepage afterwards. It was
A bit messy. Apart from on the track things where things can happen in the interaction of sport, did you have any other injuries or any other teammates have issues?
not in high school so much. Not really. No.
All right. Your ambitions in high school were to be number one in the group. What did you expect of college and how did you mix it with academics?
I knew I was going into a good program. I met Coach Sutton. I had not met Coach Fry, who really handled most of the distance workouts. But that summer, before I started school, they had open meets all summer long. So I actually went camping. I took a tent. 17-year-old kid drove across the state, was camping in a state park, and met some of the guys at a track meet and literally showed up. Some of the guys I met that first day are still lifelong friends. And you mentioned Birdman earlier on. So I showed up the first practice. I had my Harrisburg area Roadrunner shirt on, which was a Roadrunner. And From that day on, I became known as Birdman. That's
Ah,
where it came from. Oh, that's the Birdman.
how was the transition in level of intensity effort once you made the move to IUP?
It was hard. Like from my background, I was used to getting knocked down. I was used to not being number one. I was used to having to step it up. Nothing was ever handed to me. I never felt that I had that much talent. And there's a lot of IUP runners that I would say were overachievers. Going into the fall with Coach Fry's workouts, you would literally crawl back to the field house, get changed, and crawl into the cafeteria before they closed and try to eat, then crawl back to your dorm room and try to get some study in it. It was pretty intense. We were running a lot of times twice a day. We were meeting at 6 in the morning and then having the workout in the afternoon. We were running along on Sundays. Literally, it was a pretty intense program. I loved it. In my first year, there was a number of pretty good freshmen, a guy by the name of Ken Trilly, Dave Thompson, myself. And that year, Ken Trilly was the only one that made the top seven. Dave and I were probably eighth or ninth for most of the year. I remember a quad meet at Slippery Rock where we had four schools participating and we were expected to win. We were looking to get qualified for the two national championships. And for whatever reason, that was the day most of the team decided not to run very well. And I found myself with the last 400 meters of the race finished at homecoming of their football game with their whole student body yelling and screaming. I was third at that point in the race on our team. One of our seniors, Bob Costello, who was dying, pushed me onto the track and said, "You got to go get this guy." And I ended up getting out kicked by a 408 miler. I ended up eighth place. We lost the meet by 1 point. And I guess the comments afterwards, "What's that guy doing up there? Where's everybody else at?" For me, that was great because I knew I could run with our top runners.
How much was the team aspect of your experience then?
Even though cross country can be somewhat an individual sport and IUP, it was a team sport, I think any of us would have run through a brick wall for your teammates. The camaraderie was just unbelievable. Some of those guys are still my closest friends. It was a great experience. Now, academically, I started out as a physics major, and that was pretty tough with the running load. I soon found out I liked computers better and ended up switching to computer science and ended up having a successful college career with that as my major. But sports definitely took time and energy. But I also saw a lot of people with too much free time that were wasting their time. You really could only get crazy one night, and that was Saturday night.
Yeah.
The
Well,
rest of you really had to concentrate.
yeah, you mentioned your high school decision to miss the season and go to work. What did you do for university? Was it a time when scholarships were available? Did you
No,
do any extracurricular things besides sports and academics?
no, I pretty much, while I was in school, at least initially, I concentrated on school. I found an IUP at that time was a bargain with a reasonable summer job. You could pay most of what you had going in. So I did not work the first few years when I was running and going to school.
Let's talk about things that now experience for even at the high school level. Let's talk about attitudes and what you understood, what was available in terms of trainers, injury repair, and nutrition of the 70s.
People didn't think much about nutrition. If anything, they were going into marathons and so forth. It was like, oh, we're going to carbo load. We're going to have pasta and other things like that. Nutrition was not something that was talked about too much. I know as a 6'2", 150-pound runner with 2% body fat, I could sit down and eat two large pizzas without even blinking an eye, but it was gone. Uh, it was gone because your metabolism was so high. We didn't really think about it. Now, certainly the metrics and everything else are much more geared towards monitoring your body, even blood tests and nutritional aspects, the biometrics. Really wasn't much of a thought back then.
Because of the story you told about breaking the school records after a week of rest, how was the ideas of tapering and how did you feel on race day? Were you tired? Were you rested ever?
Going through the cross country season, we worked pretty hard and tried to taper near the end. Later on in my career at IUP, I think I hit a number of my better races before the end of the year. That's always a tough thing to look at, is when to start easing up to reach your peak at the right period of time. Never easy, because I think when you're training hard, you're always on that fine line between being in great shape and being injured. And that's just the way it is.
What was the position of cross country? A very strong team camaraderie and friendships among the team. You came from Park Harrisburg Roadrunner Club was had started, running was starting in the boom. What was the position of cross country and track athletes at the university level? Anybody notice? Were they followed?
I think we had a following. It's not a well viewed sport for the most part. We had a number of the guys on the track team that hung around with the cross country guys, and they were very supportive. One of them almost got me killed my first 3 weeks in school, but that's another story.
It's not going to get told if it's not told now. So
I actually interviewed that person, a guy named Eric Romley. So it was a great group of people. And I would say most of the upperclassmen were very, very welcoming, supportive. And it didn't take very long to feel like you were part of the family. And this is from a guy who was fairly introverted in high school, going into a situation at college.
your ambition in high school was to be number one. You had success in multiple distances. What did you do then, seeing the level of competition in college in track? How did you figure out what events were the places for you?
We had a number of good milers my freshman year. We didn't have a lot of people that wanted to be crazy enough to do the steeplechase. I migrated my first 2 years mainly to the steeplechase. I still would run a mile once in a while. My sophomore year, I ended up qualifying for nationals in the steeplechase. Unfortunately, at the state meet, I hit my knee and it blew up pretty big, but I still went to nationals, but really didn't do that well. At that point, I decided after my sophomore year that I was going to concentrate on the 5K and try to keep my knees in. My first 2 years, I had success. I was doing well in the steeplechase. We had a good steeplechase program. I qualified for nationals, but going into my sophomore year across country, a little bit more of the same. Although I had high aspirations of being on the top 7, I was pretty much 8th or 9th my sophomore year as well. We had some very good teams. They had performed well at nationals. And it was really my junior year is when I broke out. That was the year we ended up 3rd in the nation, Division II. I was pretty much that whole year 2nd on the team. At the state meet, I was our first runner at the state meet, and we did fairly well. We tied for 3rd in nationals. So we had a very good national meet. And going into the spring of my junior year, that propelled me. I broke the 5K record for the school, and I broke the 10K record for the school in my junior year, and qualified in the 5K to go to nationals.
Well, let's talk about nationals and cross country, because IUP raised its standing because of hosting bigger meets. They had a small field. Mac Park was the running cross country course, but then they moved to a bigger, much more fancy golf course and big meet hosted there. What was your memory of IUP moving to the big time of meet host?
The Meadowlands, which is where we held our meets, the golf course that you're referring to, it was a phenomenal cross country course for a couple reasons. First of all, it had some fairly major hills. It had some long stretches. It had just about everything you want in a cross country course. Some of the larger meets we hosted, when teams from the Midwest would show up that are used to flat courses, it was obviously to our advantage.
Do you remember the nationals meet?
For my junior year, and had a successful track season, but near the end of that year, I was having heel issues and a bone spur. Going into my senior year of cross country, I ended up in the Indiana hospital for an operation to take out a bone spur. I was not able to compete in which would have been my senior year in cross country. We hosted nationals that year, and it was a successful meet. I ended up redshirting and coming back 1 year later to get my final season across country. So I
And
missed the year we hosted nationals. I did not run.
the how was that surgery in terms of your confidence, and what was the prognosis, and how did you recover?
It was an interesting summer. I finished track, limping on it. Coach Fry had sent me to a podiatrist. I'd gotten some steroid shots in it to try to take the inflammation down. Literally 2 days after one of those shots, I ran my best 5 mile ever, but then I couldn't walk for 3 weeks. It's a funny story. My parents were actually on vacation. I was up in Indiana that summer and they were going on vacation. Coach Fry came in and said, you know what? Let's just go have this operated on. Literally, I had a surgeon, the same surgeon who had pulled the shrapnel out of Rocky Blyer's leg in Vietnam. He was from Vietnam, working in the Indiana hospital. He scraped off my heel bone of the bone spur. And it just took a long time to come back. That whole fall, I was trying to come back, but really, again, I'm just looking to the future. I'm looking to spring track and I'm looking to come back one more year to run cross country.
Let's talk about the transition to longer races. You had been running road races before you got to IUP as a high schooler. What was the road racing environment of that time?
Harrisburg, where I was living growing up, was phenomenal because the Harrisburg Roadrunners Club, you could probably jump in a race almost every weekend somewhere, all different distances. We had some ultra marathoners, the best in the country at that time, running out of Harrisburg. I remember one gentleman, Park Barter, would run like from Harrisburg to Pittsburgh, just eating McDonald's cheeseburgers the whole way to keep himself going.
What was the longest race you ran before college and by the time you graduated?
I ran my first marathon in Harrisburg, probably my senior year of high school, but didn't really do any serious marathons till I was out of college.
What happened then in your final cross country season and after?
So I hadn't run my first senior year. I'm coming back in the fall. That spring, I had an internship in Pittsburgh, and I was literally driving to every track meet from Pittsburgh. I was training at the University of Pittsburgh and just driving wherever our meet was. So that's not an ideal way. You're not really competing against your teammates in practice, but it was okay. It was me getting stronger again. And that fall, I came up all summer long and trained before that fall and started out the season. We won a race at Glassboro State, New Jersey. I was second to a guy who ended up a Division I All-American. I think I ran 24:40 or something like that for 5 miles. Great start to the season. We had a very good season. Going into the NCAA qualifiers, it was going to be in Philadelphia at Fairmont Park, Fairmont Plateau. We ended up winning the team race that day. I was second in the Northeast. I don't think anyone's finished above second yet in that qualifier since then. We ended up qualifying for nationals. It's probably my best race ever. There was a kid from Edinburgh who was sixth that day who ended up sixth at nationals 2 weeks later.
Who was that?
Brian Jordan.
All right.
It was a great race. We were planning on going to Division II and NAI. Division II was a bust. We did not run good as a team. Flat as a pancake course. A week later, we ended up going to Kenosha, Wisconsin for NAIs. It's a crazy race in Kenosha because there's 400 runners at the starting line. And it's like a big wide starting line. And it winds up a hill, a half mile up the hill. There's a fence gate. You have about 12, 15 feet that you have to get through. So 400 runners a half mile later have to get through that opening. And so I had everyone talked into, we're going to cut right up the hill. We were going to cut the turn off. We're going to run through the weeds. I remember getting to the top of the hill. I was in second place. And I'm thinking, man, if I could just hold on. And I did. I held as long as I could, as far as I could. I was dying most of the race, but we ended up, Pitch out kicked me from IUP in the last 400. He was 15th. I was 18th. And another guy, Lou DeBridge, was 23rd. So we all made All-American. If our other four runners hadn't been knocked down at the start and got run over, they had spike marks on their back and everything else, we would have been in the top four that day.
For you, that's a pretty good ending to your college career. Did you take a break? What happened with your running and what was going on in the world of running and where you felt you fit in?
This is the fall time to look for a job. I was interviewing. I ended up taking a job in Rochester, New York at Eastman Kodak Company. January 1st, I'm in Rochester, New York. I did not know a soul. But Rochester, New York had a unique running club called the Greater Rochester Track Club. They had a social running group and they had a highly competitive group. It was a wonderful place for me both to start my career, but also to continue my running career. We had races almost every weekend. The competitive part of the club, we would go and compete. We would go down to Cornell, race Cornell College in cross country. We'd go to Penn State. We actually won an international cross country meet in New York City on Belmont Racetrack. They actually put hay barrels up and you had to jump over the hay barrels. It was an international cross country course. Henry Rono from Kenya won it. Eamon Coughlin, who at the time was the indoor mile record holder, he was second, and we won the team title. A couple of the guys I trained with up there, Craig Hull and his wife at the time were the top marathon couple in the United States. One weekend, we picked up a guy in Ithaca driving to New York City to run the Mike Cannon 20 miler. The guy's name was Pete Fitzinger. At the time, I didn't know him, but we're talking in the car. I'm driving to New York and him and Craig Hull were in the back talking about breaking the 20-mile American record. And Pete Fitzinger did. That was in 1983. In 1984, Pete Fitzinger was on our Olympic team in the marathon and in 1988. So he made 2 Olympic teams.
Nice.
So it was cool. The group in Rochester really was competitive. We had a great group of guys. And that was the start of my post-college running.
Did you know anybody?
Not
On that running team, it was all new people.
all new people.
And how easy was it? What was the camaraderie or the culture of running to enter in?
It was great. We had summer track meets. I immediately started training with some of these really good runners. The camaraderie was great. It was just like at IUP, it was a family of great runners. In fact, even the runners who were more social, they would have social runs on Sundays. It was just a great organization, whether
Yeah.
you were highly competitive or not.
Let's go back to IUP. Pretty important 4.5 years of your life. Coach Fry has passed on. Coach Sutton is still around. What are your memories of the coaches at IUP?
When you look at life decisions and you end up someplace as opposed to somewhere else, I can't imagine a better place for me than IUP. My relationship with Coach Sutton was great, but my relationship with Coach Fry was something that lasted really until his death. He was the best man at my wedding almost 42 years ago. His wife sang at my wedding, and he was a big influence in my life. He really beat the crap out of us in practice. We ran extremely hard, but I think we had a lot of overachievers that did much better than they would have from his guidance. So I look back, it was a great experience. Some guy named Matthew Klinowski and introduced me to a woman who's been my wife for almost 42 years now.
Let's talk about that in the culture of friends you've had. How many of your friends also got their partner in that era?
I think a lot of them did. I know one of the guys I graduated with, Dave Thompson, he got married a year before me. An awful lot of people. It was interesting. You either met your spouse there or you might have gone a long time without getting married. I still have friends that haven't gotten married.
Let's talk about relationships and running and the sacrifice it takes. Like you said, when you were at IUP, academics and sports gave you a full plate. So you concentrate on that willingly. But how does it take a toll on you? What you miss, give up, and how challenging is it with the relationship for the many hours that continuing this kind of dedication takes?
You know, I look back and the lessons I learned, the hard work, the dedication, it can't help but flow into your current life.
Yeah.
I know even today, I have way too many things on my plate, and that's okay. I've always got things going on. I'm leaving this Saturday for a trip to Africa to help teach small business skills. That's a step out for me. I'm 65, but I'm looking to the future. I've got things I want to do. So I think that all lends back to the work, the dedication, the discipline that goes into what you need to be successful in running. I think it applies also to life in general.
Where's the overlap? You have very positive attitude, a present moment and future looking attitude about what you want to do and how you want to live your life. Did you feel an athlete, a runner, a person driven to do your best in whatever? What was your identity and how did it change when running competition became less of a thing for you?
Looking back at those years when you're highly competitive and you're running a lot of races, I think I was probably running 30 races a year. Um, Obviously, your identity is your running because that's what you're doing. What I'd say now is my identity, while running is still my memory, my history, and everything else, still very important to me. I've moved on. If I'm not running, that's fine. I've got other things in life that I'm pushing forward with my faith, my family.
You have grandkid now.
I do. I have a 5-year old and an 8-month old that live in Montana. So that's a big thing too.
What takes the place of intense concentration on competition?
In almost everything I do, whether it's work, whether it's new business ventures I'm doing, it's all a game. I look at it as life's a competition. And maybe I'm not as intense as I used to be. I think I always had a pretty decent life balance. It's probably better now than it was. I do see people who running is everything. And when they lose it, it's very hard for them. Although running was a big part of my life, it was never everything. And so I think my transition is okay.
Everything we've talked about, especially those ideas of what you've gone through in the last 5 decades, transitioning through the different phases of life that we all go through. How is this stuff, running, competition, success, relationships, family, going to inform what you're going to be doing in Africa when you teach business skills?
I think so. This is a maybe something I'm going to do more of as I grow up. The gentleman I'm going to meet over there has been doing this for a number of years and he's got some contacts all over Africa. Having been self-employed now for over 20 years, it seems like a natural thing for me to give back and try to lift up others with some of the skills I have and some of the abilities and some of my mindset.
One other thing I want to talk
I
about
think you
is
have a
your
story
attachment to track and
in
field.
my
Are you still a
hometown with
fan?
Kerry
People that get
Green,
into
right?
business and careers often are less able to find the scheduling time to get involved in coaching. It lends itself so much to people that stayed in education. Were you, in your experience, mentoring, coaching, working with any other runners from the position of an experienced runner?
So I try not to have regrets or look back and think I should have done something different. If I have any small regret, it's the fact that I really didn't get to coach like some of my mates that went on to coach high school, to coach college at fairly high levels. I do wish that, I don't wish, but yeah, I miss that. I did coach a lot of youth soccer when my kids were growing up, and that was pretty cool. And I think you can take some of the lessons you learned in running to any sport and
Right.
the motivation, the discipline, the teammate, the camaraderie. So yeah, I kind of missed all that, but that's all right the way it went.
And you were in the mile was the glamour race for a long time in track. How much of a fan of international track and field are
So I
you?
missed going out to the World Track and Field Championships last summer because of the deaths in the family. I actually was intending to go to Oregon. I am not a huge fan anymore. I find I don't watch a lot on TV. I just don't. Still love the sport, but I am not a fanatic when it comes to watching a lot of international meets, national meets. Now, I did get excited. The World Track and Field Championships last year, there were some phenomenal American performances that were through the roof. So I enjoyed watching that. I would have enjoyed being there, but I'm not that involved in watching a whole lot of it anymore.
And what about rivalries? You crisply remember some of your races in college. Do you remember any of your rivals? We don't see these rivals that frequently, sometimes a couple times a year. Are there any people from other schools that you ended up getting to know better?
There was a couple kids from high school that ended up going to Shippensburg that we competed against. I've lost track of them over the years. There's some guys at Slippery Rock that I still see once in a while, but not too much. It's mostly some of the IUP alumni. We try to get together every once in a while. That's always pretty cool. Um, We had a number of big events with Coach Fry and Coach Raymore retired from IUP. We had a huge event for them where we had over 300 alumni show up that weekend. I can't say I'm running into a whole lot of guys I competed against back then.
You had a few serious injuries, bone spur, surgery, spike, and the travails of running the steeplechase. How is your body now at age 65 held up?
Up until this year, I was reffing soccer at a fairly high level, some fairly high level leagues around Pittsburgh. I made the decision this spring that my running's not that great anymore. And I don't want to be not keeping up. So I'm not reffing anymore. That being said, 3 years ago, right before COVID, I was running in Hawaii, tripped and separated my shoulder, ripped my rotator cuff. So I had to have shoulder surgery, pretty much a year of PT. And what I do now, I do a lot of lifting. I do a lot of workout programs. I try to work out twice a day. I'm stronger than I've ever been in my life. My running's not as good, but I'll do a lot of biking this summer. I did a bike ride from Boston to Washington, D.C. a few years ago for MS. If I can't run that much, that's okay. I augmented it with other activities. I got Kilimanjaro on my list of wanting to climb that in the next 2 years. I've done things like rim to rim of the Grand Canyon. So if I'm not able to run, I'll find alternatives. It's okay. I think it's great just trying to stay in shape. At 65, a year and a half ago, I was diagnosed with out of control diabetes. And I was able to knock that down through exercise and nutrition and eating habits in general. It's just another challenge. That's all. And so I'm comfortable with where I am physically today, but I'm striving to do better.
Yeah, you have a great attitude. You look at everything, as you've said, from your perspective as a challenge, as something to get through.
So I'm still working. I'm working more than I've ever worked. I don't really see myself retiring. I see myself doing more work in Africa. I'm also on another board of a former Steeler, John Cole, with his ministry. So I think when you retire, if you stop doing, you never can stop moving. You never can stop. I think when you stop moving, you're dead. So that's not my plan.
I think you have a story in my hometown with Kerry Green, right?
50-miler. I was going to run a 10K. We show up in Harrisburg. We stay at my parents' place. Kerry runs a 50-miler. I run the 10K. So we're driving back to Western Pennsylvania, and he's doubled over with side cramps. And we thought it was appendicitis. So we stop at Johnstown at his mom's house. So she takes him to the emergency room the next morning. I'm there all day by myself in Johnstown. I'm listening to the radio, and it was funny because they were filming Slapshot at the Johnstown War Memorial with Paul Newman. And apparently somebody saw Paul Newman with a beer at the Johnstown War Memorial. So you'd have somebody call up saying, I don't care if he is Paul Newman, he shouldn't have a beer there. Then someone else, a little old lady, would call up saying, it's Paul Newman. He can have whatever he wants at the War Memorial. So I listened to these talk show hosts all day while they're filming, which was a classic hockey movie, Slapshot, hilarious. Filmed it with Paul Newman at the Johnstown War Memorial in Western Pennsylvania.
Yeah, with the three Hanson brothers. Because I grew up in Johnstown, so I'm familiar with the Johnstown Jets were the minor league team, and the Hanson brothers. Everybody needs to see that movie. Absolutely.
And Johnstown War Memorial was my first Bruce Springsteen concert my freshman year, too.
Yeah.
Nobody even knew who Bruce Springsteen was back then, 1976.
So what was Kerry's actual ailment?
I don't think it turned out to be anything.
Kerry, yes. He was one of the early and very successful ultra runners.
There's a guy who never made our cross-country team, our top 7 or even our top 14, and has turned out to be just a phenomenal long-term runner, should be admired by everybody. Running Boston 6 decades in a row, below 3 hours, just amazing longevity.
Yeah.
And he makes me look negative.
That's right. That's right. He sets the bar pretty high for a positive look at life.
But I look at guys like that and it's reflected on me because I just stay away from negative people.
I'll give you one last chance to tell everybody how Eric Romley almost killed you.
Oh, sure. Okay. So I'm 3 weeks into college, and it was KDR West. It was the Western house for Kappa Delta Rho fraternity. And we had a runner who was in KDR, and we had a guy named Eric Romley who was actually was a track guy, but was a great friend of the cross country team, a great athlete, great guy, still a good friend. And for whatever reason, they took this freshman 3 weeks on campus to the KDR house. And somehow Eric almost got us killed there. I don't even remember exactly how, but I think Kim Bork got us out of there somehow or other. He was a brother. So somehow we survived with our life. All I can say is I'm glad they didn't have Facebook when we were in college, because some stories should just be left up. I don't know whether you remember this, but since in the fraternity I was in, when you got lavalier, which was like a pre-engagement, they used to take you, rip your clothes off, and make you run up the hill to the fraternity house naked. I was living 2 miles off campus, so I wasn't that concerned. And I can remember 12 o'clock one night, I hear somebody beating on the door. They bust the door open. I'm on the second floor. I'm sleeping. They grab me. They throw me like on the roof of the car. They're just holding me there, drive me 2 miles, rip my clothes off. This is in track season. I'm literally no clothes, no shoes, running up the street. And there's a light on me. And I'm figuring it's just them beaming me. The next thing I know, the light pulls beside me and there's a red light going. It's a police. And I'm like, so I like froze and I said, I better get out of here. So I cut down an alleyway. I just hear thump, 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 thump behind me. I tripped, fell in some bushes, got up, ran, finally went up the back alley. Cop car pulls down. I dive in the house, dove under a bed. And that's my story. They never caught me.
Yeah, maybe that track training and Ed Fry's extra training made you a less of a catchable fugitive for the police.
Well, I have to pick glass and stuff out of my feet. That wasn't real pleasant.
You probably don't know exactly who's going to be in your audience in your first trip to Africa to be teaching. Do you think stories of running are going to come up? Do you use those in your coaching of soccer? Did you talk about your experience as an athlete or competition when you were a coach?
A little bit. You might actually be helping me here, because I just found out I'm on the venue on a revival service on Easter weekend in Katito, Kenya, that I'm supposed to speak. And I have no idea what I'm supposed to speak about. One thing I do know is God will show up and I will have the words that I need to. So yeah, that's coming up. That's interesting, because I'm actually going to be at Eldoret for at least one day. And Eldoret's where a lot of the Kenyans train at high altitude. I think it's 8,000 feet or something. That's a great, you may have just helped me there.
You speak well. A lot of people have gone into education. It forces them to stand up and talk to kids and everything. But you speak when you do have a good story and you're very self-aware. I think you'll do great. And I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. I've managed to work overseas and work with lots of different age groups and a lot of speaking to groups. Your attitude will make you surely well received. I'm sure it'll be a great fun to cross another cultural barrier and another international boundary to experience something new.
I definitely appreciate those words from you, buddy.
I think everybody's going to appreciate your words. You're a cheerful guy. You're positive. You don't have anything bad to say about anybody. Say hello to your lovely wife, Mindy, to you and everybody that knows you. Thanks for your time. It's been great talking to you. Do you have any final words for everybody who might hear this, who crossed your path, knew you, or has now just met you?
I just want to state that I believe the statute of limitations have run out on that streaking.
Thanks for sharing your story.
Thanks, Matt.
I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.